You are watching UBN.
You Black Niggers Network, Channel 94, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill.
I'm your host, Chris Hardwick. Let's start the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. Check this out. On this episode, oh man, I got a treat for you. This is going to be fun because, as many of you know, or you've been hiding under a rock, hip hop actually turns 50. Well, actually has turned 50 this month. And I said what I wanted to do was, in honor of hip hop, make it Hip Hop Week, or in this Hip Hop Month, review some albums that I had not reviewed before. And each album that I've reviewed so far kind of gives you a glimpse as to a specific time in my hip hop journey. If you've been following the podcast, you know, I talked about the Beastie Boys, which was a group that I didn't know was white. And then subsequently, the Two Live Crew, As Nasty as They Want to Be. The Beastie Boys album, their debut album, License to Ill, As Nasty as They Want to Be by the Two Live Crew, which came to me at a pivotal time. And then the DOC's debut album, No One Can Do It Better. Now, all of those were albums that came out kind of like in my infancy with rap and hip hop, if you will. But this album that they're going to review on this particular episode, I was already a vet in hip hop, if you will. But this is one of my favorite albums, period. This is one of my favorite hip hop groups, period. We're taking it back to review my guys, Little Brother, and their sophomore album, The Minstrel Show. This album was released September 13th, 2005. Now, this album, again, means a lot to me. It's very special, and I'm going to touch on it as to why. But where I was really with hip hop and how this album kind of molded or changed things, if you will, for me, I can definitely explain to you. I'll be honest, having grown up through the 80s, grown with hip hop through the golden era of hip hop in the late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s, that stretch from like 1985 to maybe 1998, 99. That was a great time for me as far as hip hop was concerned. As a fan, I grew with the music. We lost some along the way, as far as artists like Pop and Big. But by the time the 2000s rolled around, honestly, as a fan, I started looking around and I didn't really like what I saw. Hip hop had kind of changed a little bit. In fact, it kind of changed a lot, and it wasn't as dope as I remembered it to being. And quite honestly, I was about done with hip hop. I'm gonna keep it real. And I stumbled upon this particular group. And when I tell you this group and this album gave me a shot in the arm as far as rejuvenating how I felt about hip hop, it was the Minstrel Show and it was Little Brother. My friends back then used to say that I was a backpack rapper fan. And that was partially true. But the thing that really stood out to me about Little Brother, in particular this album, was one, first and foremost, these guys could spit. Little Brother at the time was the rapper Big Pooh, Fonte, and Ninth Wonder. And they had a previous album called The Listening. And I did an album review on The Listening earlier this year. But I didn't hear The Listening at the time that I found Little Brother. So this was my introduction to them. And I went back and listened to The Listening. But like I said, September 13th, 2005. By this time, like I said, I'm a veteran hip hop fan. I'm married. By that time, 2005, we had 2 kids. We had Dion, our oldest son, and then we had Dion in 1999, and we had Cameron in 2002. So, married guy with 2 sons. I was settling down. I had settled down. We bought a house. I wasn't hanging in the clubs and all the stuff like that in Atlanta. We were living in Atlanta like we still do now. But, I was settling into being grown, if you will. And nonetheless, I found this album and I found this particular group. And there aren't too many albums or artists that I can say, like, as soon as I heard them, like, I knew that I was going to be hooked on their music. But this was one of them. The thing that really stood out to me initially was they were rapping just like because Fonte and rapper Big Pooh were the rappers. Ninth Wonder was he solely handled the production. They were rapping like dudes who needed a record deal, and they already had a record deal. But they rapped what their subject matter was rapping about. It was stuff that I could relate to. They were funny. They were thought-provoking. They were very sure of themselves. They had been to college. So in a lot of ways, like, they kind of mirrored where I was in life, or where I had been in life. And most of their content was totally relatable. So, they weren't going to be talking about people they shot or how many drugs they sold. They really developed their craft, and they really, really put a lot of work into what it was that they were doing and who they were as artists. And like I said, I found this album and it just took off from there. And again, I really just fell in love with the album the first couple of times I heard it. So let's get into it, man. The Minstrel Show, as I mentioned, September 13th, 2005, total runtime 53 minutes and 31 seconds. I didn't really know much about them. I came to later find out that all 3 members met while they were at college at North Carolina Central University in Durham, North Carolina. And so that's an HBCU. Shout out to HBCUs. And, so that right there was impressive to me in and of itself, because as many of you know, I'm a proud alum of an HBCU, South Carolina State University. And then these guys were dedicated to the music, and they just really sounded like some hungry ass rap dudes. And when I saw the album, a lot of things kind of ran through my mind. First, because I remember I bought this, I heard a song, and then I went and bought the CD. And I bought the CD off the strength of the song. The song was called Loving It. And I'll get into that in just a second. But the CD, the album cover of the CD, really, because you see the faces of each member of the group. And first and foremost, the album is titled The Minstrel Show. Now, if you're familiar with history, you know what a minstrel show is. If you don't, look it up. And then you had that with the backdrop of the album cover of their faces, almost being in blackface on this album cover. And so that right there really had me intrigued. Like, I'm like, whoa, these dudes are like, they are sending a message already just on the album cover and the name of the album. And so that right there had me hooked from the beginning. But once I got into the album, I was like blown away, like, because I hadn't heard anything like this. I mean, like, they literally, like I mentioned earlier, they gave me a shot in the arm. They kind of reminded me of Public Enemy a little bit. It reminded me a little bit of Outkast. It reminded me a little bit of Tribe. It reminded me a little bit of De La. You could tell that they had pulled their energies and their inspirations from different places. And I think that, you know, I could tell just by, and, you know, again, we didn't have the internet like that. I mean, we had the internet, but the internet really wasn't popping like that in 2005. But you could tell where their influences came from musically. And so I was impressed. And the more and more I listened to this album, the more and more I got hooked. They, again, very intelligent, very matter-of-factly, but then they were from the South. And for me, that meant a lot because, you know, we didn't really have a lot of spitters like that from the South. And more specifically, they were from North Carolina. And as many of you know, I'm from South Carolina. And we didn't really, there were no MCs coming out of South Carolina. And there were only a handful coming out of North Carolina. By that time, I want to say P.D. Pablo had come out. And that was about it from from the state of North Carolina. Not to say that there weren't other MCs, but there hadn't been any that should make it on the national level. So the album drops, and I'm like I said, I'm hooked. Now the album was not without controversy. First and foremost, I mentioned to you the theme. There's a couple of themes. First, when you first listen to the album, there's a running skit of a concept of a fictional TV network called UBN. And UBN stands for Black Niggas Network. And it's more of a satire. It talks, they kind of touch on, and they have skits that kind of poke fun at, you know, at us as far as Black culture. It's not too much overt, but it makes you kind of think. And it really, if you have a sense of humor, if you have a dry sense of humor like me, you would find that funny. So that right there made it funny to me, or very intriguing, especially as I started listening to it and getting into the skits and everything. And I'll touch on that in just a second. But this album, for as dope as it is, this album didn't sell. I think to date, this album may have sold 100, maybe 200,000 copies. I know it's not gold. It never went gold. Again, there was controversy surrounding it. Little Brother, the members of Little Brother Fonte and Big Pooh, they have explained how they didn't really have a connection with their record label, which was Atlantic. And back then you needed an A&R, someone to help push your album. They didn't have any type of relationship with their A&R. And they released a single for Loving It. And then that was it. And there was no push. There was no backing, if you will. There was no, there was nothing to drive the album. And of course, you're on Atlantic Records. That's not necessarily a powerhouse at that particular time for hip hop. I mean, they had hip hop acts, but you know, Little Brother wasn't high on the totem pole, and it wasn't like they were on Def Jam or Death Row or Bad Boy or something like that. Nonetheless, so this album doesn't sell a lot of records, and it's solely because, you know, they just didn't get the backing from their label. It had nothing to do with their level of talent, because if if you want to measure it by talent, then this album should have been platinum. But again, I'm biased because I absolutely love this album. This is one of my favorite albums. This album never falls out of my rotation. So let's get into the tracks. Again, the Minstrel Show. First and foremost, the rapper Big Pooh and Fonte, two incredible MCs. Again, this is my first time hearing them. And if you go back from, because I had to go back to the listening, which was their first album. If you go back to the listening and then you go from the listening to the Minstrel Show, you can see the growth in their lyrics and their presence on the microphone, both rapper Big Pooh and Fonte. And then obviously Fonte is a vocalist as well. He can sing. The boy can sing his face off. And so you have all of that playing in, as well as incredible production from Ninth Wonder. Ninth Wonder is one of the best beat makers of his generation. I probably put him in my top 10 beat makers of all time. He's just that dope. So you have all of that in the backdrop. You don't have to push from Atlantic Records, but you do have a situation where you got a dope album and it's on the streets. So let's get into the tracks. The album starts off with the aforementioned skit about UBN, and the first track is called Welcome to the Minstrel Show. Really, really interesting hook. Love that joint. And it sets up the album from the skit. Then we get into track 2, Beautiful Morning. Love this beat from Ninth Wonder. Pooh and Fonte deliver as usual throughout the entire album. Then we get to track 3, The Becoming. And this is just on Fonte. Then get to track 4. Track 4 is produced by Ninth Wonder as well. Ninth Wonder did all the production with the except of a couple of tracks. But we get introduced to crew member Darian Brockington on vocals in the background. D Brock, as we call him. D Brock crushes it on the background vocals. And then we get to the comical skit Cheating, which was produced by Piano Reeves. Here we get introduced to a character that Fonte created by the name of Percy Miracles. In the song, he is bemoaning the fact that his old lady cheated on him. And that song, and the skit/song is comical. Then we get to track 6. Track 6 is called Hiding Place, again produced by Ninth Wonder. That's got the rapper Big Pooh, Fonte, Elzai from Slum Village, as well as Joe Scudder, who is a member of their crew as well. Another banger. Then we get to track 7, Slow Down, which was actually the second single that was released. That features Fonte and the rapper Big Pooh, and once again, Darian Brockington on the vocals. Then track 8, Say It Again. I love this joint. This features the rapper Big Pooh, Fonte, and their crew member Sean Don. Then we get to track 9. It's a skit called Fifth in Fashion, which sounds like a commercial that you probably hear on the radio. Very funny, produced by Nicolay, who is one half of the Foreign Exchange. Fonte Coleman is the other half. Then we get to track 10. My favorite track on the album, Loving It, which is Fonte, rapper Big Pooh, and Joe Scudder. That joint bangs, man. It's that was my introduction to Little Brother, that song, and that song got me hooked. The next track 11, Diary of a Mad Black Daddy. That thing is fun. It's still funny to this day, and it sounds just like how a black dad would sound in a house. Then we get to track 12, All For You, produced by Ninth Wonder as well, with Big Pooh, Fonte, Darian Brockington, and James Poyser on the keyboards and strings. Love this joint, man. I mean, they haven't missed in any of these songs. The next track is produced by the homie Crisis. It's called Watch Me. This features rapper Big Pooh, Fonte, Crisis, and scratches by the world famous DJ Jazzy Jeff. And then track 14 only features the rapper Big Pooh. It's called Sincerely Yours. Track 15 Still Lives Through, which is a tip of the cap to A Tribe Called Quest. That features the rapper Big Pooh and Fonte, produced by Ninth Wonder. Then the album closes out with the Minstrel Show closing theme, produced by Ninth Wonder. And that's the album. It's man, listen, this album still bangs to this day. Like I said, it's probably one of the dopest albums that sold the least amount of records that you would ever want to hear. And, I mentioned earlier that it wasn't without controversy. Another controversy that happened with this album was when they shot the video for Lovin' It. The video was not played on BET. BET allegedly said that they weren't going to play the video because it was quote unquote too intelligent. Now the video mirrors the song, and they are making fun of some of the subgenres of hip hop. They're making fun of gangster rap, backpack rap, earthy, icy, all of the stuff that was happening in hip hop. I would implore all of you to watch the video. It's not a video that I think shouldn't have been not seen by, BET. I mean, BET had BET Uncut at the time. So how could you not put Little Brother video on? So that was a controversy. And then another controversy happened with the mic rating in the Source. There was an editor-in-chief at the Source magazine by the name of Joshua Ratcliffe. He actually retired. He retired because he disagreed with what the mic rating that this album got. He reviewed the album. He suggested that the album get 4.5 mics. The owner of the Source, Ray Benzino, said that it should get 4 mics, and overruled him, and refused to change it to a 4.5 mic album. And so subsequently Joshua resigned. And that's saying a lot, because jobs weren't necessarily easy to come by back in 2005. But he felt compassionate enough about that album to give it 4.5 mics. I will agree. You guys know every time I talk about hip hop on here, when we talk about albums, we do album reviews. This is a 4.5 mic album. I tried to take my biases aside and put them aside and look at it objectively. And I really do think that this is a 4.5 mic album. This album is cold. Again, I think when you look at the subject matter, when you look at what they're actually talking about, what they're rapping about, when you look at how the package is actually presented, Little Brother, they make no bones about it. Like, they are lyrical guys, but they also want you to learn and take something from the music that they've created. And I think that's something that stuck with me, because that's what the groups prior to 2005 did. And so that's where I really see where they were influenced by Tribe, influenced by Goody Mob, influenced by Outkast, influenced by De La, because those type of groups did those kind of things. PE, just to name a few, and the Roots. So I think, their music reflects, what they were trying to get across. And interestingly enough, the album is completed. They have the fallout with Atlantic Records, and I think they end up leaving Atlantic Records after that. But this is the second and final album that they would record as a trio. The next album would be Get Back, and I think that was 2007. They did it as a duo because Ninth Wonder left the group. And Ninth Wonder, his production definitely fits Little Brother. I mean, like, he had a signature sound, and his sound was perfect for these two spitters that he had right beside him. Ninth Wonder left the group, and I'm not going to get into all the details, but from what I've read and from what's been said, Ninth Wonder left the group, and they all parted on amicable ways. And friendships remained the same, and they moved on. Now that would change over a period of time. But this is the second and the last album that they would perform as a trio. And, as a fan, I think we were a little disappointed because we wanted to hear more, because I'll be honest, if they don't have this fiasco with this record label, there's no telling where this group could have gone. I really and truly believe like this group could have been and should have been, one of the best groups ever. Again, that's me being biased because, again, they're one of my favorite groups. So I'm going to let you in on my bias. But I think, everything happens for a reason. Ninth Wonder went on and he did his thing, and he's still doing his thing. Little Brother went on and they did their thing. They broke up, got back together, and delivered an incredible album, May the Lord Watch. And at the time of this recording, they are supposed to drop a documentary that kind of chronicles all of this. And we'll see what happens. It's supposed to drop this calendar year, so we'll see. Ninth Wonder is not a part of the documentary, and from what they've said, he was invited to participate and he declined. Well, he has not reached back out to them, I guess. Nonetheless, this album is dope. Again, it's never fallen out of my rotation. It's a 53-minute album that doesn't even play like that long. The skits and everything are funny. The bars, I mean, I literally could go bar for bar on a lot of the songs. Like, I think probably one of my most quotable bars is Fonte's verse on Not Enough. When he talks about when he wants a girl, when he doesn't want a girl. And I've quoted that in tweets. I've quoted that in blog posts on my website, my blog, I should say. And so, yeah, that's like one of my favorite verses on the album. Say It Again. I mean, like, there's no skips on this album. It's not a perfect album, but it's a 4.5 mic album, and it still resonates with me. It still resonates with fans. Do yourself a favor. If you get a chance to see Little Brother perform live, watching them perform some of these songs is funny. I mean, and really, really dope. I'd love to see, and of course, we haven't seen it happen, but I'd love to see Fonte bring out Percy Miracles. The character Percy Miracles is just hilarious in and of itself. And that song, Cheating, is is kind of like an ode, a homage, if you will, to Mr. Biggs, Ron Isley. But yeah, this album, again, from front to back, it still bangs to this day. 2005, again, like I said a little earlier, at that time I was on my way out of hip hop. Rap had changed for me. It had become too commercialized, over sexualized. It was too much. It wasn't what I thought it was, what I loved it used to be. And I really thought I was on my way out with hip hop. And then I heard this album and it pulled me right back in. And I'm thankful for that. And I think, if you listen to this album and you visualize what they were trying to accomplish, I think you'll feel the same way. I think this album, like I said, it's criminal that this album didn't sell any records. It's not because they weren't talented, because they clearly are talented enough. And I think if you listen to this album, I think you'll get a deeper appreciation for who Little Brother was back then and who they are today. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thank you for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. The podcast drops every Thursday at midnight. From time to time, we drop bonus episodes on Sundays. If you feel so inclined, hit us up on Cash App, $ TWELVEKYLE. Like I told you guys before, I wanted to do something. I want to do something special for Hip Hop Week, Hip Hop Month. I've given you a few album reviews of albums that I hadn't reviewed. And like I said, this is one of them. I'm really surprised that it's taking me this long to review this album. But you'll see more of these album reviews, and they won't necessarily be anniversary albums. But I want to kind of give my perspective of where these albums stand with me and why I like them so much, or love them for that matter. But yeah, again, thank you for checking out this episode of the 12 Kyle podcast. This has been an album review from the Minstrel Show from Little Brother. Again, I'm your boy 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming out to the Minstrel Show tonight, especially our guests, Elzai of Slum Village. Don't be afraid, you can clap. Mr. James Poyser was here as well. I'd like to thank DJ Jazzy Jeff for popping by. I'd like to thank you at home, of course. And I'd like to give a special shout out to my baby mama Tamika and our twin daughters Faith and Abstinence. Daddy's coming home, babies. Daddy's coming home. Man, I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. Good night, everybody. Good night.
It's time to say goodbye to all of our friends. Our time is up and now the good times must end. We hope we made you laugh and chuckle or grin. And hopefully one day soon we can do it again. We'd like to welcome you to everything there is to know. This is our life, this is our music, it's our minstrel show. We'd like to welcome you to everything there is to know. This is our life, this is our music, it's our minstrel show.
Hey, y'all ready for the party to be over? Y'all ready to go home?